Hello everyone and Merry Christmas to all of you. Thanks for tuning in to the podcast. If you're new on this podcast, Rebound with Resilience is a podcast dedicated to raise your resilience, mindset and mental wellness. And today, it's going to be quite a fascinating and a raw episode, sometimes even shocking. So I guess if you have known me since I was 19, you might remember a time where perhaps I went slightly insane and created like a 4-hour video of me doing quite extreme stuff. Yeah, so after some thought, I decided to really share my story in full with all of you. I was in a state of mania back then, so essentially a period of extreme high where your self-esteem and your sense of reality is kind of warped. Yeah, so I think since then, it's been 7 years, and in the same room that I started a YouTube channel and burned my A-level cert, now we are actually starting proper on a podcast. So I thought it'd be a good way to just reflect back on how far we have come and just share my story with you. And I hope that it will give you some perspective to help yourself, to relate potentially, and also to help someone else that might be facing a similar situation. Okay, so look forward to it. On today, for the first time, I'm actually going to be hosted by someone else. I'm going to be hosted on my own podcast by none other than Yida.
Hi everybody, welcome to my podcast now.
Yeah, so anyway, you don't know who Yida is. He is an actor. He's a MediaCorp actor. And now he's a producer and editor on this show. He's going to be working with me. If you haven't seen the previous episode, you can check it out because I interviewed Yida in depth. Okay, so I trust him to be able to host me and just allow me to share my story today. So Yida.
Hopefully, yeah. Okay. So let me take over from now.
Sure.
Right, okay, so welcome to today's episode. So as Kevin mentioned, today is going to be a very different episode, right? So today with me is a very, very different guest, right? Somebody, if you watch any of the Rebound with Resilience episodes, you will have seen him, you have heard him. Somebody who I've known for like about 6-7 years from now.
Yeah.
And
from now.
Sorry.
Yeah, I get you. No worries.
6-7 years for now. And somebody who I've really seen the change, right? From somebody who really was just studying in uni, going crazy in life, having fun, to really develop himself into a business owner, currently running multiple projects and really trying to make something of himself. I've heard some of his stories and I find it fascinating. So I feel that definitely everybody will get a different perspective, right? But the things he has went through, I have not gone through, right? So on today, it will be slightly different in the sense that I will be bringing the perspective of somebody who has not really a strong understanding on mental illnesses and how maybe potentially you can share how people like me can actually truly understand and truly help out people, right? So without further ado, I'll introduce Kevin again. So my first question for you, right, Kevin, is that why do you decide to do this now, right? It has been so many years. You have overcome certain challenges. Why do you decide to share it today, especially?
Wow, I think, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Like for years, actually, I wanted to share it. For years, I actually wanted to share it, right? But I was always held back by this fear. Even though, yes, I made peace in my past, right? But I know that people can potentially use it against me. And so I was very fearful. And I remember like 3-4 years back, I told my mentor, I was very bothered by it. I said that, if I continue in training and eventually start up, right, will people actually look back and say, wow, Kevin was like that. Is he fit to run a business? And he told me this, right? He said, Kevin, why are you letting an imagined future fear rob you of your present joy and focus? He said, why are you living in the future? No one knows what's going to happen. What you can do, right, is focus on what you can do now. Build up your credibility, build up your passion, build up your expertise. And when you eventually get there, right, the time you will know. That's why now I have so much gratitude. He said that you will know when the time comes, right, when you can share. And when you do, right, why not think of it another way? People are going to look at it and say that, you know what? Like he was from there, right? Instead of it being a weakness, it's actually a strength. Because even though he's gone through all these things, right, now he can come out and share that story authentically. It becomes an added credibility instead of a discrediting factor. So I share this because I want to really own it, right? And because, more importantly, for a lot of you all listening, right, I know that I'm not alone. I know this for a fact, that especially during this COVID period, right, there are many people that are having issues with their mental health, whether it's depression, anxiety, or many different conditions, right? I just hope that by sharing my story, it can relate to you in some sense. It can provide you some hope. And hopefully for the rest of the people who may not fully understand or experience mental health before, challenges before, they can at least empathize and know how to better help somebody with a challenge. To raise the empathy and resilience of our nation. And that's really why I'm doing this.
Okay. That's a very interesting perspective.
Yeah.
So let's start from the beginning, right? So how did Kevin got started, right? Tell me about your childhood.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of explore that because that also gives some indication or relatability to someone else, and also gives indication into why I might have eventually got into depression. So my parents I met in church. So that kind of really indication. My dad was my mom's Bible class teacher.
Right.
Yeah. So scandalous, right? But anyway, no lah. Of course, they got married and then they had me. They took a while to get me. Actually, they actually took 10 years to have me, and they gave up. My mom actually gave up on the idea of having kids. You must understand that my mom loves kids. Like, she's a kid magnet. Every time, like, kids will run to her, right? And so she really wanted a kid on her own. But I think she tried for many years and she was ready to. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of pain.
Right. So what's your mom's occupation?
Oh, she's actually a teacher.
Yeah, that explains the kid mania, right? The kid magnet thing.
Actually, some teachers grow up to. I don't want to say that. Okay, but generally, yes, teachers are people that have passion.
It does fulfill a passion.
Passion about kids, yeah. So anyway, she loved kids, and I think it was very hard for her to let go of the idea that she's not going to have a kid. So eventually, when she let go, she said that this peace actually overwhelmed her. And actually, interestingly, that was also one of my points in recovery when I learned to let go completely. But at that point, right, I think God, you can say, blessed her with a kid. So for some reason, I popped out. And pretty much my upbringing, I have two younger siblings. My upbringing was like very conservative. Yeah, so typically, very typical. My parents raised me out of love rather than fear. So there wasn't really much issues like growing up with my self-esteem. I was quite a secure kid. But I would share two stories that I remember very strongly that kind of give an indication to what I value. Right, the first one was Pokemon. Right, so I'm sure Yida, you watch Pokemon as well. It's a show that everybody watches when we were young And I remember one particular scene, right, where Pikachu was losing to Raichu in a gym battle. Raichu's the evolved version of Pikachu. Okay, and basically got hospitalized. Pikachu got hospitalized because he's badly beaten. And in the hospital, right, Ash actually gave a Thunderstone to Pikachu to evolve. Okay, for some context, Pikachus can't evolve unless they have a Thunderstone. So he gave the Pikachu and said, do you want to evolve so that you can stand a better chance of defeating Raichu? Then Pikachu, right, he just slapped. I remember this, he got very angry, right, and used his tail and just whipped the Thunderstone out of Ash's hands. Because in his mind, right, that represented Ash's lack of belief in him. Yeah, his lack of belief that he could actually compete and he could win. So to me, that represented Pikachu's strength and his resilience, right? And I got very emotional about that. It's a very odd scene, but I just got very emotional about it. Another scene, right, or rather story that I got emotional about was when my mom told me a story of the ugly duckling. Yeah, okay. So the ugly duckling, right, is like, for those of you that don't know, is like a duck that was ostracized by his own family. Right? He grew up, he looked a bit weird, looked a bit odd, and his own family actually ostracized him. And because of that, he went out, he didn't have a family. And I remember very clearly, right, crying for them. My mom told me, she said, I really cried for the duck. It was a sad duck because I thought to myself, like, wow, family to me is like sacred. How can a family actually abandon like somebody like that? And I didn't just see it as a fictional character. Like, I saw it as my brother. I saw it as someone that I felt for, someone that very real. Interestingly, right, you know the story, right? After that, the duck eventually became a swan, which technically you cannot laugh because only a baby swan is a cygnet. But anyway, it became a swan. And I remember I cried again. Yeah, I cried again because I was so happy, right, that duck managed to overcome his insecurity and find a place where he got valued and, overcome against the odds. And then I realized that, wow, since young, right, there are two things that really relate strongly to me. Number one is connection, love. And number two is resilience. And it's funny how everything kind of ties back to this is what I'm doing now, right? But growing up, those were the two things that really were indication of my values. But more strikingly, right, Yida, I would like to share about this, right? More strikingly, right, I also had like a type A personality. Yeah, so typically is maybe Yida, you wanna explain what type A personality?
So for context lah, right?
Yeah.
So type A personality was a term crafted by two doctors lah, actually.
Yeah.
So Friedman and Rosenman
Yeah.
in 1976, right? So they were two cardiac doctors actually. So they were heart surgeons, right? So they were researching about and they had a theory lah that why some people get more heart attacks than other people, right? So they classify all these type of people as type A personality. So some traits that this type A personality people have are, they are more urgent. Usually they are very more intense about their work. They are also quite emotionally intense in terms of being angry easily, being a bit more aggressive as compared to people lah. Whereas other people might be a bit more laid back, more chill and stuff like that. Yeah.
Of course, it's a generalization, right? But this is a personality theory that was developed and essentially refers to people that are highly competitive, right? Status conscious, always wants to win. This is the person that you hate in class because
oh my god,
because they always ask for extra marks, right?
Just remember those students that always go and find the teacher. That's the big indicator.
Yeah. Even they got 80 marks, they want 81, they want 82.
Yeah.
So that was me actually growing up, right? And because of that, technically you can say that I did well in school, right? My parents are both teachers, so I had a lot of backing, a lot of support, and I generally did well in primary school. I played badminton in primary school. Did well. Eventually, DSA. So this is funny. So I DSA into tried two schools, Raffles and Victoria School. So during the DSA trials for badminton, right, my mom specifically told me not to play soccer. And you can already guess what I did, right? So I played soccer, someone slide tackle into me. My ankle got destroyed. And I wrapped my ankle, spray painkillers. I went for the DSA trial. It was tough, with a sprained ankle. I still managed to just place outside the top three. But I couldn't get in.
Right.
VS Victoria School actually took me in for badminton. Victoria School took me in for badminton. However, at that point, I was also playing a bit of tennis. Not as serious as badminton, but my dad and mom played tennis.
Yep.
So I was thinking about competitions outside. And I also went to a DSA trial for Raffles in tennis. Yeah. And interesting enough, I think the coach saw my potential. He actually gave me a spot.
Right.
Yeah. And so technically, being parents, they want a kid. I mean, of course, they don't say it to me, but they will want me to take the Raffles spot. But to me, because I was type A, right, I valued being on the first team more than the status of being in Raffles.
Yeah, being recognized is more important.
I didn't want to sit on a bench in Raffles. At least in my perception, I would be sitting on the bench if I played tennis in Raffles. And also because at that point in time, I kind of enjoyed badminton more. So I decided, I'm going to go to Victoria School. So I went to Victoria School, right? I think, the first few days in the camp, I was just being for lack of a better word, a bitch or an ass, right? And I was just typical type A personality, thinking that I'm too good to be there.
Right.
And I kind of showed it in my actions and everything. But I think one thing that changed me was the principal. I remember, right, and this is a side lesson on leadership, right? Back then, he's Mr. Low, back then, principal of VS. He really was into the students' lives. Really, when I was in the badminton finals, right, I remember losing one set down. We were losing 2-0, one set down. I was one more set to defeat. He was there, right, at the court side. His armpits, he was sweating, right? He was looking at me. I still remember today. He looked at me and said, "Come on, Kevin, don't give up." Throughout the whole match, right, he was making eye contact with me, cheering me on. And this VS spirit, right? The VS spirit is infectious. Like, they will all crowd around and they would cheer. And that's where I fell in love with Victoria School. Really, I think that changed my paradigm. And eventually I did win that match.
Right.
But we lost that final. It was the E-Zone final.
Right.
Yeah, but my point is that, side point of how really powerful leadership and one person's impact can be. But at the same time, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy in badminton because I wanted to make it the national level. Being a typical personality, right? But I couldn't. And I was always complaining in training. They complained that the training was too easy.
Right. Yeah, type A personality, right? The ones that keep going to a teacher, can you give me more homework, right?
Correct, exactly. So because of that, generally my teammates didn't, I guess, not that they didn't like me, but of course, when you say that training is slack, they will think you're showing off, right? But that was authentically how I felt. I wanted something more. And so in Sec 3, I actually made a decision to switch to tennis. I played tennis. Concurrently, I was playing tennis. I was competing in stuff outside. And I thought that maybe with proper training, I could make it at national level.
Yeah.
On top of that, coaches came in, right? They were good coaches, I remember. Till today, I'm in touch with them. Changed my life. I'm going to talk about them in a while. But because of them, I switched to tennis. I struggled a bit, but eventually made it at least on a decent level. Fast forward, I actually DSA'd to Raffles. So I did well enough for my tennis, right? And I DSA'd into Raffles Junior College. Back then, Raffles Junior College. So I did not have any pressure for O-levels. I did not, basically I just felt like, okay, I already was in Raffles, right? And I just need to do my best. So I had no pressure during my O-levels.
Right.
Yeah, anything below 20 will get me in.
Yeah, as long as you pass the JC mark, right?
Yeah, So I got in there. This is where it got interesting, and Raffles. Maybe what are your thoughts, right? I mean, before I share my thoughts about Raffles, what are your thoughts on generally Raffles Junior College, the stereotypes and everything?
Yeah, so it's like the elites law, right? I guess that most people have the same feeling that only the best of the best can go, right? And then usually people who go are financially usually better well off, right? Then usually more angmo based, right? There's a stereotype, right? That if you Chinese very well, then you can go Hwa Chong, right? Then if you are more English based, if your mother tongue not as strong, maybe you want to consider going Raffles, or not say maybe but prioritizing going Raffles.
Yeah, so you're right. I think first time I realized that people had the impression people are very, at least in Singapore, quite status conscious. So even beyond when after Raffles, right, every time you tell people you're from Raffles, they have this look on their face you are some. They are must be very smart. Right? And the interesting thing, right, is that those stereotypes are not necessarily false. Not to me, but when I went in there, right, even though I was good at what I did, there was someone that was way better. Whether it's in sports, if you do well in sports, there's someone that does that and plays 10 musical instruments. And of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the point, right?
Yeah, there's the level of all-rounder, the feeling, and there will always be somebody better than you.
Exactly. So what I would say is that can get competitive, but my class was generally, some of my classmates, if you're watching this, right, you probably remember me and the class. It was very fun. My classmates, some people call us the Christian class. Very funny, because 3/4 of us are Christians. And I say this not because Christians are better than anyone else. I'm just saying it that because we had shared values and they were sincere and they were loving, generally there was not a lot of bad blood between us. We cared for each other and we really sincerely wanted each other to do well. So I'm very grateful for that. But a lot of that pressure, again, with the type A personality, right, is inward.
Yeah.
Right? And so I put a lot of pressure on myself. I would look at the essays, and I think to myself, my goodness, even today, I cannot write the essays that I'm writing at 17 years old. Same thing, chemistry, math, they pick up things so fast, right? And in my mind, I'm like, wow, I did feel a little bit inferior in that sense. But one thing in my mind was that I told myself, right, whatever I lack in brains, I'll make up for it in effort. I will make sure I'm the hardest working person. So I always pride myself on that. Recess, I would spend 15-20 minutes eating and then going to study. Of course, not all the time. Sometimes I have to chat with my friends, but most of the time I was actually using it to study. And that is good. That is good, right? If it's tempered by the ability to detach, right? It's because I put so much hard work, right? Naturally, you're going to be attached to the results. And I cannot say for certain that at that age I was fully detached from the results. Okay. Apart from that, I also remember trying to compensate in other ways. Apart from hard work, I always compensated by being a clown. I think you know me, right? I would say that generally my personality is quite spontaneous, but I took it to another level in Raffles, because I wanted to stand out. And I still remember there's one time first few months of school, during bio lab, I'm not sure if I told you this story before. During bio lab, I actually ate I ate a water plant, a hydrilla for money. So we were all doing experiments, counting the bubbles. Come on, how many bubbles come out of the hydrilla, right? So it was so boring. So I said, okay, I will eat the hydrilla for some cash. I need my spaghetti bolognese for my lunch money. So I told my friends, right? And then slowly they spread, and everyone started coming to my table to put money. I'm some beggar, some freak show, right? And the teacher was the best, because the teacher was just 2 years older than us.
Right.
She was those relief teacher, right? 2 years older than us. So she came over and laughed also. So I thought, okay, everyone's laughing. I ate the hydrilla. And it tasted decent. Slightly bitter, but it was okay. So that day I still remember. The only recess I remember, my only lunch I remember, a nice plate of spaghetti bolognese. It was hard-earned money, hard-earned meal.
Disclaimer: please don't eat your plants in any of your. If you are students, please don't eat your water plants
don't
in your
do that,
in your classes.
Don't do that. But generally, plants can be eaten. A lot of plants can be eaten, but probably not a water plant. So what happened was, after that, I thought everything's fine. Right? We all laughed. Right? That same day, my mom got a call from the bio head saying that, man, I think your son ate a hydrilla in class. And my mom called me up. She said, Kev, I know you ate hydrilla. Please don't do it again. Then she to her, it's like she's not surprised anymore. So I got a yellow. The teacher was going to give me a yellow slip. Basically, a yellow slip is like a warning, right? If you get 2 yellow slips, red, and then you're out of school. So I didn't get it. She said she'd give me a chance. But the next time a new teacher came into class, right, the permanent bio teacher, she just came out of labor, I think. She was on maternity leave. Wow, she really whacked me. She really scolded me. She called me a hungry ghost. Wow, she really super fierce, right? And I was laughing inside, but I couldn't laugh outside. But she turned out to be one of the nicest, most sincere teachers. I met her recently when I went back to Raffles. But she had to kind of come in and set the context clear that there's no nonsense in my class.
Especially with you in it, I think the context is very important.
Yeah. And of course, the 19-year-old teacher eventually apologized to me. It's very funny. She said, I'm so sorry, Kevin. I had to tell because I was afraid something happened to you. Anyway, okay, so coming off that, right, I compensated. Now, so this is where it comes to the part where, we talk about mental health. So fast forward, right, I think to the A-levels, that was when the pressure started to build. So I remember actually representing Singapore in the ASEAN schools. So I always wanted to represent Singapore. I did eventually achieve that goal. But I also didn't study during that period. I skipped my prelims, some of it to go overseas. Yeah, so in my mind, right, I was underprepared. And I had to compensate by studying damn hard. So I remember doing 14-hour days, right? Over here, 14-hour days, wake up at 10, sleep at 12. Yeah, and I would basically just study the whole day. And that was, you can argue that was a mistake because I stopped exercising. I stopped taking care of my other areas of life. I just zero in on that. And that was the start of a little bit of anxiety. This same room, right, that I'm in, back then my neighbor above, right, was doing renovation. Of all time, she was doing renovation. My whole room was vibrating. Okay, renovation, right? Yeah. Man, my whole room was vibrating. I was vibrating. There was no way I could differentiate equations and learn, right? And this place, right, was my sacred place. As an introvert, right, I studied best alone, and this place was my sacred place. So because of that, I actually had a fear that I couldn't complete my work and everything. And the anxiety built up. So because of that, right, before the A-levels, the day before the first paper, GP, first day I couldn't sleep. First time in my life I couldn't sleep before an exam. Before the paper itself, right, before going to the paper, I went to the toilet. I remember praying to God a very desperate prayer. It wasn't a prayer of hope. It wasn't a prayer of gratitude. It was a prayer of desperation. Like, please just help me through this. I walked into the exam hall, sat down. I hate aircon, right?
Yeah,
that's why this actually says extremely hot. Yida is dying. He's sacrificing for me. So anyway, I hate aircon. But this aircon was blowing at me. There's a huge draft blowing at my left face. I got very distracted. So I told the teacher I cannot do this. I have to move. So while everybody was starting doing their papers, one joker was carrying the table, moving to the corner. I brought the table to the corner of the hall and put it down there. So 10 minutes past the paper start, I was still carrying my table. During the essay writing, GP essay writing, there was this light coming in from my right. This small beam of light. On normal circumstances, I probably wouldn't have bothered me. But because I was in a hypersensitive, sensitive state, anxiety, right, it bothered me a lot. I couldn't complete the paper. Okay? It bothered me. And that was the first time, right, I went back home distraught. Absolutely distraught. Because in my mind, it's all or nothing.
Right.
And what I feared most, right, was what happens next. The rest of the papers, rest of the 20 plus papers, where am I going to go? How am I going to focus? That fear ate me up alive. Because of that, it was because of that, right, the anxiety got worse. During my math A-level paper, I think it's a 3-hour paper, I went into the exam hall, looked at the questions, I've practiced it hundreds times, many times. I couldn't write anything down. Complete mental block. The way you can describe it, right, is like oxygen being cut off your brain. And you just cannot think. You cannot think. So I went to the toilet, I sat down, came back out, handed out blank papers except for the questions. went back home that day, this room, of course, the bed used to be here. I remember I sat down, right? Like this was used to be the bed. I sat down like this. I was shaking, obviously. I was just so distraught, right? It was just really the beginning of depressive thoughts, ruminating thoughts. My mom came in, straight home. I remember this was 9 November. I still remember it, 9 November around 6:30. She came in, she knelt. I mean, I can't kneel down, you won't see me, but she knelt like right in front of me. And she held my hand. She held my hand and she said, please, like, God, please take away like the burden from my son and like put it on me instead. I still remember her prayer. And our household is conservative, so generally my father prays. This is one of the first few times, in fact, the first time I heard my mom pray. And I always think that parents cry 3 kinds of tears. Okay, tears of joy and pride, tears of hurt when you disobey them, and the last one is tears of sorrow. For the first time in my life, right, I saw my mom cry tears of sorrow. That was a very defining moment, because I'm very close to my mom, and to see her in pain, and of course myself in pain, right, it was very difficult. But because of her love and support, right, what happened was that, so anyway that happened, and then the next paper, right, was a 3-hour paper, paper 2, math. Same thing happened, mental block. Couldn't complete at all, alright? After the paper, distraught, visibly I was shaken already, like I was like completely out of it already. In my mind, all the thoughts started to come in, started to have the stress reactions, everything. My friends around me was just like very surprised that it happened to me. I remember my friend said to me, right, Kevin, you're the last person I expect this to happen. And I told him, yes, I agree. But the fact is that it happened. And I remember them very clearly, right? Raffles had this huge canteen. There's an intersection between the gate, the classroom, and then the other gate, right? This huge 4-way junction. I was there. A lot of my friends were there, 6 or 7 of them, and they took turns to actually hug me and like give me comfort. I still remember. After that, my friend told me to see the counselor. So I went to the school counselor, right? Her name is Aggie, I remember. She retired already, but back then she did something called Bowen therapy. So she massaged my head, helped to clear my mind, and it helped. So it helped me during that short period. And I went home, right? Very tough. I wanted to give up my A-levels really. I wanted to say there's no point. Definitely going to get U for math really. U for context is the worst grade. So she said that, my mom said, you know what, I'm going to bring the doctor. Let's see what we can do. So I got brought to the doctor. They gave me some medication. I can't remember what it was. Some mood stabilizers. Because of that, somehow I managed to scrape through the rest of my papers. I don't know how. I just scraped through it. I went to a different room. I told the teacher that I need to go to a different room. One of the systems manager took me. She was very kind. She took me. I spent the rest of my A-levels in a weird room by myself with one fan. And sometimes the fan will be noisy. Right? I'll tell the invigilator to off the fan. And then when it was hot, and I tell her to on the fan again. So my mind was just so sensitive, right, to stimulus around me, and I struggled through it. So I struggled through the rest of my papers. So you might ask, right, what happens next, right? After the papers was when the real battle actually began. So the day after my paper, right, you would say that, okay, now the stress is gone, right? I can slowly recover. No, it was the beginning of inverted commas, my computer actually crashing. So what happened was, my mom took me to massage my head, I remember. I came back home, slept. I woke up in cold sweat. Okay, completely cold sweat. This is the night after my A-levels were over. And for the first time, right, a suicidal thought actually came to my mind. I don't know how it happened. It just happened. And I thought maybe it's better to take my own life. The moment it came in, right, I kid you not, literally, right, my spine shivered. If they say a cold shiver ran down your spine, right, it's exactly what I felt from the head all the way to the tailbone. I felt it. My whole body just shook. I woke my mom up immediately. When I told her that I thought that, right, I felt the exact same reaction going through her body. I was hugging her, right? Exact same. I literally felt her shiver go down her spine. Because she told me that, please don't say that, Kevin, you have so much more to live. But anyway, what happened was, I went back to sleep. The next morning I woke up, I went to Bedok Reservoir. I tried to run it off, couldn't. The thought was still there. So I told my parents I need to go to IMH. I need to go to IMH because I cannot get the suicidal thought out of my mind. What scared me were two things. Number one, I had a suicidal thought, and number two, I couldn't control it. The second one actually scared me more.
Right.
So I wasn't aware of what's happening to me. So I went to the IMH. I remember went into the department. The guy wasn't a psychiatrist, I remember. He was just a general doctor. He looked at me. He said, "Bhai, are you depressed?" He looked at me with his large eyes, right? And I'm saying this not out of any form of racism or whatever. That's just telling the story like it is. At that point when I was depressed, that bothered me. That to me was a lack of empathy, and he was challenging me, and I'm sure he had good intentions, but he was just saying that your A-levels are over, you should be fine. He gave me some medication, went back home. I remember I went back home, right? The same day, we stopped by for lunch at Sheng Siong, down the road, Bedok Reservoir. During lunch, right, I sat down eating fish soup. I still remember, right? This is going to sound very odd, right? But I was visualizing my funeral. I was visualizing all my friends in the front row, my classmates. I was visualizing myself in a coffin. And I just couldn't tell my parents. But it was so odd. Like, that was the moment I thought that, wow, there's nothing else that can help me anymore. Because I went to IMH, right? And in my mind, they couldn't help me. So I went back home. The thoughts continued. What it is, basically, the best way to describe it, right, is like constant 24/7 suicidal thoughts and death thoughts. Like, you're going to die, your life is going to not amount to much. And basically visualizing yourself being like cut up into multiple pieces. Just very gruesome thoughts, right? To the point where it just kept carrying. I couldn't sleep naturally. To the point where and this is very scary, I want to share this, to the point where, right, I completely lost my emotions. That means, right, previously I felt fear, right? I felt devastation, but came to the point where I felt nothing. Like I was a hollow human being. Like there's no spirit in me whatsoever. When my mom touched me, I couldn't feel anything. Wow, today I still maintain, right? That's the most scary point in my journey. I just felt I was no longer human. Some people call it affective blunting. I think that is the technical term for it. People do describe it when they face depression, but at that time I didn't know what it was. So that was very scary. I think that was a point where I realized that, wow, like I think I'm not going to live. Like honestly thought I was not going to live. I told my parents I need to go to hospital. They brought me to Mount E. So they brought me into a private hospital. I still remember the psychiatrist, right? He, interesting, I went into the room. He's a typical, I don't know what typical psychiatrists look like, but he basically had a vibe of someone that understood. Okay? That understood me. I remember the first line, right? He told me to describe myself. The first line I said this. I said, "Doc, I'm a Christian. I'm not supposed to be feeling this way. I don't want to take my life, but I can't help it." And he listened to me for a while. He said nothing. He said, "I need to hospitalize you." Yeah. So what he did was he told my parents what's going on. It's just a stress reaction, very extreme stress reaction. I have to tranquilize your son. So they gave me a tranquilizer. Yeah, I woke. So they gave me a tranquilizer. In the interest of time, I'm going to shorten it a bit. But I woke up. The side effect of tranquilizer is that I get cramps. So my left leg was cramping, I remember.
Right.
I was so upset. And I was calling the nurse. I said, please help me, please help me. Then she came and she gave me another tranquilizer. So I slept, right? I remember I woke up the next day. I felt better. So the thoughts were cleared slightly. The thoughts cleared slightly, right? And I was so, typical again, my personality. Right? I was like, you know what? I'm going to recover. All of a sudden, like, that thought came back to me. I went to prom because that night was prom night.
Right.
I told my dog I want to go to prom. Please release me for a while. So I got out. I wore beachwear to my prom. So you can edit it in, edit in the photo. But I had a pact with my best friend that we're going to wear beachwear.
Right.
So I stuck to it. I wore beachwear to prom. It was fun. But the moment I came back, that's where the real battle actually started.
Yeah, I think one point that you mentioned is that even though you were feeling suicidal thoughts, right, you actually didn't want to.
No.
Right.
No.
You I think it's very surprising for people like us. People like us, meaning that we don't we have no experiences with regards to that. We always thought that suicidal thoughts just means that you want to take your own life or whatever it is, right? But Yeah, you mentioned very clearly that actually you don't want to, but that thought keeps getting stuck in your mind.
Exactly. You brought up a good point, right? So a lot of times about depression, later we're going to explore like, the nature of depression. But the ideal misconception people have is that you can just snap out of it. One misconception. I in no way or shape or form wanted to take my life. Okay? It's just I'm not sure why it actually is happening to me. Back then, of course, in hindsight, I started to realize that depression is a psychosomatic disorder, which means breaking it down, psycho means psychology, somatic means soma, which means biology.
Yep.
So it's both psychology and biology.
Yep.
Yes, my psychology probably led me to that stage, but when biology took over, when there's imbalance in chemicals in my brain, that's something I cannot control. It's just like when you sprain your ankle, you can't tell somebody to get over it, right? And just walk faster. In the same way, when someone is depressed, there's chemical imbalances, they need time to rewire or rebalance that chemical imbalances. Yeah, I guess we don't really have time to really go in depth into serotonin and neurotransmitters, but the idea is that you lack certain neurotransmitters responsible for moods.
Okay. Okay. So so you mentioned that after the prom, after that was where the battle began, right?
Yeah.
So tell us more about that particular period. Because if it's me, I would think that once all the stresses is gone, then it would have been easier, right? Because it's like a snapping out thing.
Yep.
But I don't believe that's the case with you, lah.
No, it got worse. So what happened was that so that was December 2012, right? Jan 2013 to March 2013 was the toughest, hands down the toughest period of my life, right? Every day I was battling with anxiety and depression. How it manifests, right, is losing weight. I really was down to I'm like 178, 179. I was like 54 at that point in time, 53, 54. I didn't no appetite, couldn't sleep. Woke up when I hear the birds chirping. Every day I called my mom, and she was going to work, by the way. Back then she still had to work. So stressful on my family. And it manifested in suicidal thoughts. Every day I had to battle. And it's like, okay, think about it this way. Depression is okay. I'll share analogies so people can understand. The devastation, to me, right, as human beings, right, one of the greatest spiritual powers we have, right, as organisms is the ability to adapt to the situation. The ability to adapt, to overcome whatever that mechanism is, right? You can adapt to stresses and come out stronger. The devastation of depression, right, is that it basically shuts down that mechanism. It shuts down the mechanism of recovery. And without that mechanism, right, you're hopeless. It's like infecting the hard drive of a computer, the virus infecting the brain of the computer. So that is why it's so devastating. And another reason why, right, it was so devastating is because it's misunderstood in society. There's a quote by Andrew Solomon. He did a TED talk on depression. He said that it's a strange poverty of the English language that we use the word depression to refer to a kid when it rains on his birthday party, and also to describe somebody the minute before he commits suicide. So that quote was very telling to me. And you realize that we loosely sometimes just say, oh, I'm depressed here and there, right? But it's beyond that. It's not just a short-term mood. To diagnose depression, right, it has to be, again, disclaimer, right, I'm sharing from lived experiences. I'm not a professional. Yida is not professional. But from what we research and from what I know, you need a period of time to diagnose it, certain symptoms. According to the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. Yeah, it's APA, American Psychological Association kind of manual to diagnose. But yes, so just to help audience understand that is why it was so difficult. And if I may share, right, going off on why it was difficult also, right, it was that during that period I was very I told you, a very staunch Christian, right? And my faith was actually a double-edged sword.
Yep.
Right?
So, previously you mentioned, right, that as a Christian you shouldn't be feeling this way, right? So actually for with that, I'm pretty sure that a lot of people feel that way also. It's like as a Buddhist, right, I shouldn't be feeling something, right? There's a certain level of idealism that you're trying to strive for, right?
Yes.
That hurt you pretty badly.
Exactly. So idealisms, right, as now we know, right, idealisms cause infatuations, and life will always bring you back into balance. Every time you have infatuation, there will always be resentment. Because you just generally have an unrealistic expectation of how things are. We will explore that later, but that was me. Not just towards my faith, right, but towards my identity. The reason why it was so devastating was because I pride my self-worth and my identity on my achievements and my grades and what other people said about me. And that greatest strength, right, became my greatest weakness. Because all of a sudden, like you said, I lost a sense of who I am. I'm no longer that Kevin that's spontaneous, that's high-oriented, that's an achiever. And I just felt that there's no meaning to life because I'm no longer who I am, a shell of a person I used to be.
Yeah.
My faith affected me because I was like, why am I feeling this way? I thought that my God was punishing me for my past sins. You know, when you're conservative, everything's a sin, right? So that was one thing. And I remember one particular moment, right? I was praying to God. I said, God, before I go and run, remember running helped me. So before I go and run, right, I prayed to God, I said, please help me to go through this. Help me to overcome and serve you and, whatever lah. And I remember going to run. I came back after running. There was a wall that I always climb over to go to my home lah. I've done that for years. Nothing happened. That day I climbed over the wall. I fell. My shin got hit against the wall and it required stitches. Okay. So I could see the bone. Now back then, right, exercise was one way of release. So for 2 weeks I couldn't exercise because it was so painful. That exacerbated it. Okay?
Right.
I still cook for my bro. You can put in the picture. The day after at my brother's birthday, I cooked for him. You can see from the photo that I also was very, very thin. But basically that was very tough because what happened was that I pride my recovery, right, on milestones. That means I say that if I do this by this, then if I retake my A-levels by here, if I start to train for 400 meters by here, because I had a dream to be Olympian.
Yep.
So I say that, okay, I pride my recovery on milestones. Instead of letting go, I pride it on milestones.
Right.
Which is the worst thing you can do, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
So basically what you did was instead of how should I put it? When you lost your identity, instead of letting that part go and accepting it, you created other ways to feed back to your identity. Right?
Yes.
Basically it's your milestones are just a way for you to show to yourself that hey, I am able to do this.
Yep.
I am able to do this.
Yep.
So that I am still that Kevin.
Exactly.
Right.
So I didn't want to surrender my old identity. Right? Surrendering was one step in my recovery, which I'll explain in detail in a while. But how that led me to that surrender, right, was actually one of the steps to overcoming. So it was a very difficult Jan to March, right? And I would say that medication also helped. I was taking a couple of medication. I can only remember one. It was called Zyprexa. It's an antipsychotic, usually used as a mood stabilizer lah. Okay? But I was using some medication, which in hindsight, I believe did help a bit. Okay? So that's professional help is important. But it came to a point I remember, right? I met a particular gentleman. Okay? This guy was someone I respect. I can't say his name out of privacy, but I respected him growing up. I went to him, right, before my A-level results. I wanted to confess to him, right, that I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I become this person because he saw me as somebody else.
Yep.
I sat down together with him at a coffee shop in Bedok, right, and he said to me, he looked at me, right, before I said anything, he said, don't tell me you have a mental problem. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh shit, he's going to judge me, right? Guess what he said? He said, I faced it too. This was someone that I respect. And the last person, right, I would think of to have issues with his mental health. Someone that is, to me, very strong. And he said that it happened, right, because of a certain incident that happened that to me was not as serious as my A-level results. I really thought that my A-level results wasn't a serious thing anyway, so I judged myself, right? But to him, in my mind, it wasn't that serious a thing. Was then I realized that it's not just the intensity of the stressor, it's what happens also in depression. And he pointed to me, he said, Kevin, I know you're in pain now, but he pointed to me and said, that person there, that person there, that person there, everyone has their own challenges. He pointed to everyone in a coffee shop. He said that now it's up to you. I believe that you can stick it out and eventually there'll come a day where you understand. That was really one of the first times where I said, hey, wow, even someone I respect faced it. And if you could go through it, maybe I can too. A-level results day. I took my A-level results. I got an A for GP. The same paper that I thought I screwed up.
Right.
So anyway, that was very weird. Right, so I got an A for GP. Of course, I got U for math. But the rest of the papers were okay. So I remember going to Bedok Reservoir, right, without a shirt. I just took out my shirt and went to Bedok Reservoir. Yeah. I told the guy that I spoke to at Bedok Reservoir. He stopped whatever he's doing. He came down to find me because he thought that I would take my life. Right, Bedok Reservoir is like a place where people.
Yeah, it has been on the news for a couple of years ago because of
multiple suicides lah.
Yeah.
So anyway, he came to me. He helped me out, but I think that was really a period where I started to slowly recover and let go lah. I guess the next question you probably ask is how I eventually recovered, right? I think one thing was that I stopped medication. I don't recommend people doing it, but just in my story, right, one day I just decided I'm not going to take medication anymore. Okay, it's very odd. I just stopped it. And another thing I did was that I volunteered. I volunteered in different places. I went to Cerebral Palsy Center to help kids with cerebral palsy. And I also went to dog shelters. And I just cycled to dog shelters every other day. That was the first time I started to feel my spirit lifted a bit. Because unconditional love I experienced. They did not care, right, whether I was tall, short, whether I get straight A's, straight U's, right? The only thing they cared about was that I was there, serving them, loving them, taking care of them, and they gave me that appreciation in return. Because of that, right, I felt that I had value. I felt that I had value beyond my grades.
Right. So basically, they didn't judge you based on who you were.
Exactly.
They didn't care about your identity.
Exactly.
Allowing you to gain a bigger perspective that your identity is not just the hardworking kid.
Right, exactly. And maybe actually I can bring in my dog now, right? Because my dog was a huge part. Okay, I'm going to bring in my dog.
Right, so for those who are on Spotify, currently Kevin is hugging his dog. What's his name, Kevin? Yeah, I think his name is Doggy, is it?
Her name is Eleora.
Eleora, right.
But she's, everyone calls her Doggy.
Yep.
Because nobody cares about her real name.
Right.
She's extremely confused right now, as you can see. So the funny thing about her, right, is that it was funny, I actually went to like pet shelters, right? And the thing about them, right, is that the people there, right, were so unconditional in their love. They told me stories of like animal therapy, right? How animals actually help people to recover from mental health issues. And what I felt, right, was hope. What I felt was hope that, hey, and love. So hope and love are like two big things, right? And I just felt that, wow, the dogs don't care about my background. They gave me unconditional love. So I thought that, hey, maybe I'll get a dog for myself lah. So I went to hunt a different, and eventually she was one that I picked out lah. She dodged it. She was very shy last time. So I tried to pet her and then she dodged it. And I said I'm gonna pet her. So it's actually a Shetland sheepdog, you can see.
Right.
Yeah, anyway, I'm gonna send her out anyway.
Yeah.
And see she's gonna take her leave now because Anyway, yeah, that's my dog over here. You can see her maybe next time, but I guess we have to carry on the podcast.
Yeah.
Now Yida's gonna
Right. Okay. So, just want to summarize, right? How you recovered. So previously you mentioned about how letting go of your previous identity, right? This one a bit more hokey pokey for people who cannot relate, right?
Sure.
But other aspects that you talk about for recovery was exercise, right? And then also having an environment. Whether is it people to talk to, and also I'm pretty sure that your parents were very, very supportive.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out, Ita. Okay, so I guess we can talk about recovery, right? If you ask me a question, what are the factors that led to recovery before we talk about mania? Because mania is one whole different animal altogether, right? But before we go into mania, right, recovery from depression, I always break it down into 3 factors, right? The first one is medication and professional help. I do believe that that's important. Because like I said, depression is partially a chemistry imbalance. So you need, medication that can potentially help you. Okay? How exactly it's diagnosed, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. But I can just say for myself that professional help did help me. I believe so lah. Second thing is social connectedness. I was talking to a mental health researcher recently as well into recovery from mental health in an Asian context. He was saying that in Asian societies, we value connection a bit more. So we want people to know what we're going through. We want to feel supported. But unfortunately, because of the stigma we have, right, people don't have that sometimes. And they prolong their journey of pain because they don't have anyone to support them. I was so fortunate that my parents did not fully understand, but they empathized with me. They were the best support for me. I had 1 or 2 close friends, right, from JC that also helped me out. And one from secondary school as well. So to them, I owe them my life. Okay, I say it literally because during that period, I needed the most support, right? They were there for me. Social connectedness. The third thing, right, is mindset shifts. Talking about letting go of the identity, right? It's not as hokey pokey as it is. Let me explain. So it's a moment where, one particular moment, after getting the dog, after going for a shelter, there's one particular moment where I sit down, right, and all of a sudden this thought came to my mind, right, that, wow, I don't need to go to university to be successful. I could, at that point in time, I thought about breeding dogs. I thought about being a jockey.
Yeah.
Of course, I didn't become a jockey lah. But that thought actually helped me. I said, hey, I could chart a different path for myself. Success is not defined by just my grades alone. So because of that thought entered me, right, I just felt suddenly a burden being lifted from my chest. I felt my mind literally clearing up. You can argue that there's a time where then charges are neutralized lah, whatever, but I felt the epiphany. Interestingly, that epiphany, right, was the start of Mania. And really crazy part, but let's talk about it later.
Right.
But basically that was a start. That had to happen because I surrendered my old identity. I said I no longer need to be Kevin, straight A student, doing well in my whatever. I can still create a different path for myself. If I cling on to that, right, I cannot move forward. So that's one thing. And the last thing that ties everything together is the concept of hope. Concept of hope. So however tough it is, right? And if you're watching this as well, right, and you are maybe having certain challenges, as tough as it is, I understand, but you have to find places where there are glimmers of hope. It can be in a friend, it can be in volunteering, whatever provides you that glimmer of hope, right? You cling on to it with everything you have. At certain points, right, I really felt that there was no way I was going to become the person I am today. No way. But because I clung on to that hope that there could be a better tomorrow, I am who I am today. So that's the last thing that I want to share with people, really. Okay, so medication, professional help, social connectedness, mindset shifts. You can go for a CBT, if needed. And last thing is hope.
So depression was a period of extreme down.
Yeah.
Right. So was it, when you recover, right, was it like a straight path up to normal? Or do you have to readjust a bit more?
Yeah, so I think that's where we talk about Mania, right? So, wow, this is a whole segment by itself, but I guess we have to talk about it. So after depression, right, I actually, when the thought infected my mind, I went into a period of mania. Okay, maybe before I talk about it, right, maybe Yida, you want to talk a bit about mania, because I told you to do a bit of research.
Yeah.
Define.
So for people for context of people like me who don't know what mania is, right? So mania episode, right, usually is characterized by a sustained period of abnormally elevated or irritated mood. Basically, people really just energy increase very significantly to the point of crazy. Lack of a better word, crazy.
Sure.
Because they really just became detached from reality. So you think that depression is like there's no hope for life, right?
Yeah.
Mania is like the complete opposite. It's like
Right.
there's too much hope,
Yeah.
right? People just really feel like they're the king of the world,
Yeah.
right? They can do everything and anything in the world.
Exactly.
And it becomes it's good to have hope, but at a certain point it becomes too detached from reality that it actually hinders them after that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly what you described, right? In a full-blown mania, right, the manic person will feel as if his or her goal are of extreme paramount importance and there are no consequences, and the consequences will be minimal. And they need not exercise restraint in the pursuit of what they offer. That means they have no restraint. So that's exactly what happened to me. What happened, right? Okay, back then I did not acknowledge it, right? But of course now I understand. So what happened was I was watching some YouTube videos. Back then, the OG YouTubers like Jian Hao, Dikosh, they were still in the 30k, 40k kind of subs.
Yeah.
Back then, you must understand, it was 2012. So I watched the videos, right? And all of a sudden, a thought just came to my mind, right? That I'm going to be a YouTuber.
Right.
So it was crazy, but at the moment the thought entered my mind, right, that I'm going to basically share my story with the world. I'm going to inspire them. I'm going to make sure that everyone learns the lesson that grades are not everything. And it infected me. It possessed me. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. So over the next 1-2 weeks, right, the ideas just kept coming. I couldn't sleep. The ideas just keep coming to me, right? To the point where I envisioned a 4-hour video.
Right.
Eventually it became 4 hours, right? You might be thinking crazy, Kevin, how in the world do you fill up 4 hours? Maybe you'll put some snippets here.
Yeah.
Funny things, I thought I lost the video. Only recently I managed to find it. So what I thought of, right, was basically this video that infected my awareness, and I eventually produced it. As just on a webcam, with some friends' help, right, I managed to do a 4-hour video. You might ask me, what in the world is inside the video? So now I'm going to be vulnerable and explain it, okay, as it is. It might seem shocking, but it's mania. I hope people can understand that I was in a different state. Basically, I took my A-level cert. I burned my A-level cert. I started a fire in my room. I burned my A-level cert. I said that my grades don't define me. I painted on this wall, grades do not define me, in red. On top of that, I also did like singing segments, dancing segments in my mom's nightgown.
Right.
Yes, it's fun. And also a Man vs. Wild segment.
Right.
So I'm not going to describe what I did, but if you watch Man vs. Wild, you will know what the things that he did.
Yep.
Okay? So basically very extreme stuff. The whole idea is that the whole video was very extreme.
Yeah.
And back then, like I said, no restraint. My friends at that point of time, I was telling them that I would be famous. I was a friend that went to Brown University where Emma Watson was. I said that once I'm done with this video, right, Emma Watson will know who I am. They were saying that, sign autograph for Emma Watson. I said in the group chat lah.
Yep.
So the funny thing is that my friends obviously thought I went insane, right? And you can argue that it's bordering on insanity, right? So, I mean, I can't blame them, but basically, I made the video. People close to me thought I lost it. Funny enough, right? It was featured in the One Pao also. Yeah, they picked it up. And they said that RJ Kid burns his A-level cert.
Right.
So back then it was semi-viral, at least back in those days. I think it had close to 20,000 views. And of course, if you know me since then, you probably have some recollection of it. I'll be wondering, it's so surreal, right? Like 7 years just fly past. But yeah, so that was actually the video. Anything you want to ask me about the video before I move on?
Yeah, so actually I just want to point out that actually what you did on the video, right, not too much different from some live streamers that we have seen from time to time. Yeah. It's a sad reflection of reality, but yeah, so Mania, right, what you went through, right, is basically it can be characterized as what we generalize as crazy, right? Really what people go insane for, right? So as somebody who has no experience with mental health, mental illness, right? So what would you advise them? Let's say if they were to see somebody who is going through that period of time.
I have no idea. First of all, right, before we go into that, I didn't even acknowledge that I was in Mania. You must understand that in that state, right, I thought I was right. Remember? Yeah. And my lens was coloured. So I filtered everything. I couldn't see anything. It's like Black Spider-Man. The best way I describe it is like, Spider-Man got infected by Venom, right? And then his personality traits got amplified. It was still me. Like now I watched the video, right? I cringe, but it was still me. The same desire to make a difference. And basically the video's purpose was to spread awareness of mental health issues. And it's not like I was talking complete nonsense. There are certain points where I talk sense. Right. But I even named the avatar we. Because I thought it was the avatar, right? So funny enough, right, the lens was coloured, I couldn't see it. And more interestingly, right, there were people that relate to the video. There were people that relate to the video and reached out to me and told me that thank you for standing up for us. So that emboldened me even further. That drove my Mania even further. And I met up with some of these people. That was really when I first got touched, right, with how society is really not in a box. I grew up in a box, in a shelter. Yep. So when I met people like this that have really tough backgrounds, right, I started to open up my eyes, and started to develop this obsession with mental health and helping people. Interestingly enough, right, if I may share this, reminisce a bit, right, this is also where I met my first girlfriend, if you would like to say. Can't really call it a serious relationship, but I guess for lack of a better word, yeah, we are close. So I actually posted a video and she commented on the video. Yeah, she commented on the video and said that I'm suffering. I'm suffering from eating disorder. I'm thinking of taking my life. Can you please meet me and help me somewhere along the lines? And I remember my mom told me to go meet her. I still remember. So my mom actually had empathy for that comment. And she told me have you met this person? So of course I went to meet her. And at that point, I think she was at the lowest point in her life. One of the lowest points in her life. I was just coming out my lowest point. So we filled each other's void. Right? It wasn't... Could I see a future with her? In the manic state, it convinced me that I could. Okay, but looking at it back, there's no chance. But anyway, at that point in time, we were just supporting each other emotionally. And it was like hurricane. It was really like a roller coaster. It was very tough because I got a first-hand look at how devastating eating disorders are. We talk about depression, mania, right? But eating disorders, wow, it's an element of physicality. There are people that, basically eating disorders, right? A simplified way is when you are thin. Anorexia is when you just don't eat because to you, right, food is poison. Yeah. And you just, even though you're dying, you just cannot eat. To you, it's like, I'm not going to eat because I'm too big. And it's fascinating because she wasn't big at all, she was skinny. But I could know from talking to her, right, that it was very real. She really felt that pain. And it was tough because I was in and out of hospital. And she'll tell me about how she was abused as a kid because she had a talent. She was very talented. She was an artist. She was very smart. And her parents kind of used that to sell her pieces, art pieces for money. Because child art is very expensive, right?
Yeah,
and they made a lot of money. I won't say exactly how much, but she was very special in that sense. But because of that, she had a lot of abuse. So that also led to her eventually going into it. I remember one incident, right, where I want to share. I visited her in a hospital, right? I went into the hospital. I think because she was taking her own life and everything, so she had to be hospitalized. There was a table, the bed opposite me. I saw a lady, middle-aged. She was thin. Okay, you think I'm thin? It's very thin. She looked at me, right? I was sitting across. She looked at me, right? She reached out her hand like this. She was shaking. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but she was saying, please. I could mouth it out. Basically, I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I could tell from her words that she was saying, please, pass me something. Please save me. Exactly what she said, I don't know. But I know that it was a cry for help. That moment till today, right? I close my eyes, I can still remember it. It haunts me till today. I had the soul sucked out of me. I literally felt, right, my soul, my spirit being sucked out of me. Because I've never seen someone in that much pain and suffering. And that shaped me, that really changed me. And I think at certain points, my girlfriend then was also suffering. You might ask me how it ended, right? Eventually it was too much for both of us. So we had to cut ties. And I lost touch with her for many years. Many years she went to do her own thing. Lost touch for many, many years. But recently it's interesting. We met. It was quite fascinating. So recently, I think maybe she drank too much. She texted me or something. And then probably this year, I guess, I was a bit lonely and there was social connection. So obviously my brain is telling me not to meet, right? Because it's not going to amount to anything.
Yeah.
But the heart always wins. So I went to meet her. And then I learned that she overcome. I learned that she overcome. I was very glad. And she said that there was a point where she was literally, right, bordering on insanity. She realized that she was bordering on insanity and any more she would have gone. The doctor told her that because basically when you have an eating disorder, you vomit a lot. That could actually cause holes in your esophagus.
Yep.
And that could lead you to die.
Yep.
Right? Whether it's a heart attack, lack of potassium, lack of sodium, whatever, but it caused physical injury. So the doctor said, right, if you had vomited just one more time, right, you wouldn't be here already. Because it was that bad.
Yep.
So she said that somehow she just snapped out of it. I don't know, that's her story, okay, but that's what she told me. And right now she's doing well. She's in finance, she's extremely smart. So I met her. It was nice to reminisce a little bit, but I think you kind of know when you go back home, it's not going to work out long term. You're not compatible, different values. Then it gets worse after that. It gets even more lonely after that.
Right.
you kind of know that you're in it. You know that you have to face it, but you just do it anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. So last episode we were looking for girlfriends for me, right? Now Kevin is available too. No. Okay. So we have talked about your ups and downs, right?
Yeah.
Ups and downs, right? So let's go back to balance, right?
Yeah,
so let's talk about after you recovered.
Yeah.
Right. So because I met you after you recovered to a significant extent, right? Previously you were still a lot more spontaneous than you were, but it's when I first heard your story, what drives me the biggest respect, right, is that you can go up, you can go down, but eventually you still found your way.
Yep.
And the biggest point is that unlike people who are just trying to, whether is it making money, whether is it recognition, what you're trying to do is you're taking your past experiences, right, and you're using it to help people who are basically you're trying to take all these experiences and take it to help people. Right, and to help them and to tell them that they are not alone. And that brings me the biggest respect, right? So
thank you.
So most people would think that actually the social how should I put it? Social common sense would dictate, say, people who are like that are unstable. They shouldn't be put in places where they are high. There's a lot more responsibility, right? But I'm pretty sure you feel differently. Of course, we know differently. That's why we are still doing this, right? So, why don't you share about your perspective?
Yeah, you're right, actually. That was quite a sharp observation because, like I mentioned earlier, for years, it actually haunted me, and I was very bothered by it. That, you know, people might use my past against me and say that, why he's not fit to be in this profession or line. I think, like I said earlier, that my mentor told me to see things from a different perspective. If you can go through that and still come out right, you're in a much better position to serve, to understand, to empathize, the passion, the drive. And I never said this earlier, right? But if you ask me if I can go back in time and change anything, I absolutely will not. Because if not for that, I would never have the same passion, the same clarity and drive that I have today. To be able to do the work that I'm doing now, I'm so grateful. And that pain has become a source of power and purpose. Yeah, so I guess you've asked me what helped, right? Come back into balance. It would be mentorship is a huge factor. So I didn't talk about this earlier, right? But during the time where I just came out of depression, I also met someone, a networking event that actually offered an opportunity to me to be in business. And I remember, right, the first time I met my then mentor, right, he asked me what's my name. He asked me what's my name. You know what I said? I said, you go look at the papers today. Because that same day, 1st May, I remember, was the day that the Zhao Fao actually featured me on the papers.
Burn A-level.
Yeah, it was fascinating. Put it on the front cover. So back then, right, I think they knew that I was already not in balance. But they believed in me. They saw the potential in me. To them, I'm eternally grateful because I met people, right, who were sincere, who were entrepreneurs, who believed in people's potential, not in judgment, and they helped me to slowly see things in a different perspective. When I hang around them, my mindset just shifted back into balance. And one day I just realized that I need to take off my channel take down my channel because it could affect people's perception of me. And I basically went back into a more, still the same drive, but probably a more balanced, wiser state.
So eventually you still managed to go into university, correct?
Yeah.
What made you decide to pursue education even after
that's funny.
the whole, you know?
Yeah, correct. It was funny. So the funny thing is that I actually let go of going to university. So to me, it didn't matter anymore. The funny thing is that my mom actually applied to university for me. Because because I was thinking of taking my life, right? I was in no state and I couldn't care less, right? To me, it was about survival. So she said that, Kevin, you need to apply and everything. So she helped me out. And that's why I say till today, wow. If you think your mom is the best in the world, you're probably lying. I think mine is the best. But so she applied for me, I got in. Funny thing is, during the interview, I got into biological science. So anyway, for context, right, you all might say I screwed up my A-levels, right? So I did screw up, but I got BB. So I got BB.
That's better than all my grades, just for clarification.
So I got B for other subjects in the U. But anyway, I think they saw my tennis, and then they said, okay, we're going to offer you a spot in biological science. But at that stage, I already created the video already. So I knew that I wanted to do media. I want to spread awareness. So I said, I want to go to comms. So I said, I want to go to comms. I went to the interview for communication school. But I remember the interview, I was still in Mania. So I wore a shirt with a huge ass printed shirt of a record, berms, slippers, and my hair was messy. I was wearing this huge ass necklace that I made for myself. And I went into the interview. I said, they asked me why they should take me.
Yeah.
I said, look here, I have a dream. I said, I'm going to spread awareness on mental health issues. I'm going to use YouTube. I'm going to make sure that everybody understands, right, that they shouldn't be defined by their grades. So I just spam them. And for some reason, I think Bikini likes crazy people. So they took me in. And I'm super grateful, by the way. My goodness. I'm so grateful. You know, if not for Bikini, Rebound and Resilience might not have existed. Because Rebound and Resilience, if you're not aware of the context, it was my final year project, which I eventually converted to a business and now a podcast. So I went into university. University was just a phantom most of the time. Hardly went to class. I made sure that my class was only 2 times or 3 times a week because I really knew that I want to be in business when I graduate. So I reverse engineered it. I knew that I only take modules that require the least amount of time, whether it's sports modules, so I can build my business expertise outside. I was building another distribution business and doing a lot of freelance training, going to schools, doing freelance training. And I just loved it. First time I got into a classroom, everyone was erupting. Pens were flying, right? The person like, shut up, I throw the pen, right?
Yeah.
You would think that I'll be discouraged, right? I loved it. I absolutely fell in love with it. I said that, wow, this is my passion. So I always knew that I was going to start a training company. And Rebound and Resilience actually was first a final year project in Wikimwi, social campaign to raise the resilience of secondary school students. Yeah. So a bit more about the campaign. We raised funds from NYC, from Learning Lab. We went to do gamified carnivals. We hosted events about raising resilient kids. And everything was there lah. So even though my partners are no longer with me now, I'm very grateful that they set up the base for me to carry on.
Yep. Okay. So why don't you share more about what the future holds for you? In terms of whether is it Rebound with Resilience, whether is it this podcast, I want to know if I'm going to ever get paid, right? Then also other aspects of it as well. Yeah.
Wow. I think after my FYP, right, I actually converted to a business. It's been tough initially figuring things out, but I think this year was COVID. A lot of learning. In fact, the podcast was not supposed to happen because of COVID. I decided I got nothing much to do, or just started up.
Yep.
But it took in some sense, it got more feedback than I expected. Where sometimes I think who's watching this, right? And there'll be people that text me and say that, wow, I was listening to your podcast and I teared because I was going through a difficult time and it really helped me. And other messages like this, right? So I wonder, wow, there are actually people that listen and benefit from it. So I said that, wow, okay, if I want to carry this on, then I have to think about somebody to help me because there's no way I'm doing everything by myself. And I, of course, thought of Yida. And like I said, if you don't know about him, listen to the previous episode. Super reliable. Someone that knows a lot. Little about a lot. Some things he knows a lot. He's handling everything. And of course, for me, I will actually be actively, at least for the podcast, we will be actually actively looking for sponsors. Yeah, building up our brand, looking for sponsors that align with us, potentially as a shout out or even for a sponsored podcast. So if you're listening to this, you think there's alignment, we'd love to hear from you what your needs are and talk about it.
Yeah.
And hopefully Yida can get paid.
Right, okay. Yep. So, okay. I think we are about done.
Yeah.
But just want to give a final message to our viewers, right? So, to our viewers and to our listeners, what is your current vision, right? And also, if people who can relate to you, right, what is one message that you want to share to them?
Okay, here's the message, right? Like my vision, my share with them is actually to ignite the human spirit, to love and to overcome. So there are two things that very strongly resonate with me. Number one is connection. Love, I believe it's what helped me to recover. There's a certain healing property in love that I cannot describe. And the second thing is resilience. So every time throughout my life when I see someone getting beat down, coming up again, whether it's fictional, non-fictional, I just get viscerally inspired. And I just hope that this podcast, right, can be the medium for that. I hope that by listening to the stories that I'm going to bring on, not just me, but the stories we're going to bring on, right, the segments we're going to do, that you also, that you are ignited, your spirit is ignited, right, to overcome your own challenges and to love more fiercely, and to empathize and love and to serve better. Yeah, so I really hope that, if, of course, you're having certain issues with your mental health, those factors that I mentioned earlier will help you. Seek someone to seek support. I know it's difficult sometimes, but you have to reach out. Yeah, and find a community as well as hope that you can cling on to. Yeah, and I just hope that you please give us feedback. We hope that we can continue to serve you. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, we have come to the end of today's episode.
Wow.
So, if you like this episode of our podcast, do check out the rest of it on Spotify. Do follow us on Spotify. We do have other mediums also. So do check us out on our Telegram channel, our Instagram, and of course our YouTube channel as well. And potentially in the future, TikTok channel as well. Yeah. So we'll see you in the future. Bye-bye.
All right. See y'all. Take care.